One second. Let's start.
Hey, have you started or I am not able to hear anything?
இது எங்க ஊரு மண்ணு நீ வந்து சுத்தம் பண்ணு அடதுக்கிட்டு போங்கடா உங்க ரேசிசம் Unilever please come clean up your mess and try and keep it up to international standards. Unilever please come clean up your mess and try and keep it up to international standards. Kodaikanal want put up with your racism. Not taking us seriously. Sasa dini tada baba ma bada ni sari gari sani taba dani samagari. Won't accept inadequacy.
Hey, did you just say 20 mg?
Gani sagari sani dada ni dama 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 gani ni gaga mama dada ni mama dada ni sada mama. Your soil washing was a failure. Your greenwashing won't sail here. Feel a mic, eat a fight. Justice died, you heard our pride. Clean up right. Clean the site. Act your size, not Pennywise. Treat us like we were white. Hey! Kodaikanal want it. Kodaikanal want it. Kodaikanal want put up with your racism. இது எங்க ஊரு மண்ணு நீ வந்து சுத்தம் பண்ணு அடதுக்கிட்டு போங்கடா உங்க racism. Clean up right, clean the site, treat us like we were white. Clean up right, clean the site, treat us like we were white. Clean up right, clean the site, treat us like we were white. Clean up right, clean the site, treat us like we were white. Clean up right, clean the site, treat us like we were white. Clean up right, clean the site, treat us like we were white. Clean up right, clean the site, treat us like we were white. Clean up right, clean the site, treat us like we were white. Clean up right, clean the site, treat us like we were white. Clean up right, clean the site, treat us like we were white. Clean up right, clean the site, treat us like we were white.
So, good evening, everybody, and I want to welcome Nithyananda to our webinar today. And who's so Nithyananda is a writer and social activist from Chennai. For over 30 years, he's been relentlessly fighting corporate crime and industrial injustice. He's been a core part of facilitating various social and environmental campaigns, including the campaign for justice in Bhopal, the Kodaikanal mercury poisoning, of which we just saw the video, and he was part of conceptualizing. The Sterlite issue in Tuticorin, and also the Stop Adani Save Pulicat movement, and various others. I first heard Nithi speak when I was around 11 years old. I was in class 5, and he came to our school and he spoke to us about Bhopal and later Kodaikanal. And he also gave a platform for the affected people to speak. And I remember hearing them and being deeply moved and seeing the nature of discriminatory development and all the things that surround it in a very dark way. And that hit me at a very young age. And he's been an important mentor, not just for me, but numerous other young thinkers and activists in Tamil Nadu and in other places. So thank you, Nithi, for joining us, and I want to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Yuvan, and I'm very, very happy to be at this Fridays for Future India event. I think inspiration goes all ways, all sides, and I take inspiration when people do inspiring things. And I think that one of the things that I take a lot of inspiration from is the fact that, at least in my home state, and I'm also seeing it around India, a lot of young people are at the leadership role, asking questions, challenging authority, and being very wisely and smartly irreverent. So, salams to all of you for being yourselves. And I will start my presentation with a video that I would like to share. I'll tell you the story about it. So, what we're facing right now is not something that can be fixed with changing the source of your electricity from coal to solar, or wearing a cloth bag, or changing your diet, or planting a tree, or riding a bicycle. I think that we are currently posed with a civilizational dilemma, and I will present to you one side of the civilizational dilemma. This is from an elder called Lado Sikaka, who is a Dongriya Khond from Odisha, from India's most quote unquote backward district called Kalahandi, where there is a hill called Niyamagiri, which the Dongriya Khonds revere as a sacred hill. This hill was to be mined for bauxite by a company called Vedanta, with the help of the government of Odisha, for the development of the nation. And Mr. Lado Sikaka and his clan of tribal people from the Niyamagiri viewed the entire hill and everything it represented as sacred. So let's hear from Nadu. Oh damn, I don't have Nadu. Hang on. One moment. I'm having some difficulty. Bill Gates is not cooperating. One moment. There you go. So what you heard was the voice of one side of a civilizational conflict. We, all of us, including the environmentalists, the cycle riding, ponytail wielding, jola carrying people, all of us belong to the other side of the civilizational conflict. What is very peculiar and what is very noteworthy about what Nadu Sikaka, the tribal elder from the Dongria Kond community. This Dongria Kond is referred to as a primitive tribe by government. They don't refer to themselves as primitive. They are refer to themselves as the Dongria Konds, very proudly that we are the Dongria Konds. If you look at the key message, the key issues that Mr. Sikaka has brought out, the first thing he says that you kill the mountain, you kill us. Then he says that the mountain is not just a mountain, it is religion, it is culture, it is us, it is our future, it is everything. Then he says the fight is not to save the Dongria Kond, that everybody will die if the Niyamgiri is disturbed. Just a moment, please. Can you turn off that light, please? It's that light. That everybody will be killed if Niyamgiri dies. Then he says that there are two life-giving rivers called the Vamsadhara and the other river, I forget. Two of them, that Nagavali and Vamsadhara, that flow out of the Niyamgiri. Niyamgiri is a thick forest that juices out 36 streams that become the mighty Vamsadhara and the Nagavali, and that flows through this dry district of Kalahandi. It is a lifeline of Kalahandi that will dry up if you mine the mountain. And he says that the fight is for all life forms. How many of us fight for all life forms, including people, including humans? And this is a very, very comprehensive fight. It's a fight for cultural identity. It's a fight for religion. It's a fight for belief, for identity, for the fox, the tiger, the balu, the mosquito, and the trees and the shrubs and the grasses and the thorny bushes and everything else. And then on the other side, we have us, who are talking about development. And we want to mine this hill. And by mining this hill, we get bauxite. Bauxite is converted after you pump in electricity and a lot of caustic soda, you get aluminum from bauxite. That aluminum is used to make bombs, it is used to make wires, it is used to make missiles, it is used to make aeroplanes that are then going all around the world, causing more damage. The bauxite in Niyamgiri will be mined out in 30 years. And the rivers that Niyamgiri gives birth to, the Vamsadhara and Nagavali, can flow forever. And there we make a choice between an eternal river and 30 years of bombing. And we as a society and civilization have chosen the bombing. So I'm saying that that is at the civilization conflict, because regardless of what I'm saying, I have subscribed to an economy that is inherently exploitative. And until this economy is changed, no amount of solar power or wind power will ever be able to address either the environmental crisis that we are facing or the social crisis of injustice. So that is my premise, and that is my primary argument, that environmental is a political, social issue involving discrimination against people of this generation, people of the future, and all other life forms. In that, Fridays for Future has the word future. You represent future generations, you represent, and I hope you will also represent other life forms that don't have a voice, which means that as activists, which everybody should be, you cannot outsource activism. Activism has to be practiced by every single individual, your grandmother, nana, nani, yourself, everybody, your dog, everybody has to practice activism. And that activism needs to understand that you also have to speak for the future generations. You have to speak for those animals and plants and rivers and stones and rocks and mountains that don't have a voice. In more advanced cultures, like the native indigenous cultures, they have in their Grama Sabha or in their collective decision-making groups, 2 seats reserved for two people who are not there. One is a representative who will speak for the wolf, and the second is a representative who will speak for the seventh generation. The seventh generation roughly is about 300 years from now. We are living in a time where our corporations are worried about their quarterly financial statements. Our politicians are worried about their 5 yearly electoral performances. Our city governments are worried about their 25 yearly master plans. Who's thinking about 300 years? Who's thinking about 1000 years from now as to what the quality of life is? So the task before us is something that is quite onerous. And therefore, what I would request you to do as a first thing is to bunk everything that you've learned in school, because it's a whole pile of bullshit. Problems are defined wrong, solutions are defined wrong, because problems and solutions are all a matter of perspective. You saw how Ladosi Kaka defined the problem. If I take the same matter to the government of India, they will say, we will mine the bauxite and we just have to give a share of the loot to the community by building toilets. We'll build a road, we'll do this, we'll do that. So it's a matter of sharing the loot. It is not a matter of not looting. And what Ladosi Kaka wants is not looting. Do not bring the bauxite out of the ground. Taking the bauxite, the coal, the iron ore out of the ground for doing what we are doing is against his idea or vision of prosperity. For us, the bauxite, the coal, the iron ore has to come out for prosperity to happen. And then we will talk about sustainable mining, sustainable consumption, sustainable destruction, guilt-free, fact-free, toxic-free consumption. That, I think, is a problem. That is my premise of the presentation. I'll just go into my presentation without the audio. And oh my God, I don't think this is Bill Gates. I think it's my mistake. Hang on. I'm getting quite good at this. All right. Then so I hope I have been able to make myself clear about perspective matters. If you look at the issue of environment, particularly on the issue of environment, perspective matters a hell of a lot. If you take a safe space like your home and ask different people, I mean, if you look at environmental problems and environmental solutions don't affect everybody in the same way. There are some people who are worse affected by environmental problems than others. There is no equalizer. So people saying COVID is an equalizer, floods are an equalizer. I mean, come on, you have to remember that I have gone through COVID, I've gone through the floods, I've been through the Varda cyclone. I live in the disaster capital of the world. It's called Chennai. We limp from one disaster to another. But I can tell you that through the disasters, my experience of life is vastly different and far better than what a lot of my other city citizens kind of have to go through. So your environmental experience of problems and solutions are very defined by the kind of person that you are. Are you a man or a woman? Are you a Dalit or a upper caste? Are you a rich man or a poor person? Are you a white man or a brown skinned or a black skinned or something else? So all these things matter a hell of a lot. And at the end of it, it is all a matter of a battle between the value of between what we consider valuable and what we consider worthy and what we consider valueless and unworthy. I've already demonstrated some of that with you. So if you look at what you have on the left side, our economy is premised on paved surfaces. What we call development actually doesn't mean an improvement to the quality of life. If it did, then when a village grows and becomes developed as a city, the quality of life should improve, but the quality of life actually declines. And that is because instead of having quality of life as the indicator of quality of life, we have the amount of built up space as the indicator for quality of life. So what you have on the left-hand side is high value because it is built, it is private property, and the liabilities are all hidden, and usually the liabilities are distributed to somebody else. On the right-hand side is also infrastructure. So if you know that, if you notice, there's a lot of talk about infrastructure development, that India is poor on infrastructure, that if it wants to attract Western capital or foreign investment, we have to improve our infrastructure. And all of us on the other side of Lado Sikaka's civilizational conflict are beneficiaries of infrastructure. If I'm talking to you right now, it is because I benefit from that infrastructure that is dependent on extreme exploitative mining, that is dependent upon high-speed travel of bullet trains and expressways. So that is what this civilization or this economy values. On the other side, you have another kind of infrastructure that is never called infrastructure. It is called open, unbuilt, useless lands that have to be acted upon in order to convert it into useful, valuable spaces. So what you see on the right-hand side is a Shola grassland concept. I moved into environmentalism from the dirty side of the environment. And I still am there and I'm perfectly happy with it. People like Yuvan deal with the pretty side of environment. So they go to Adyar estuary and they find these really beautiful things, and I'm looking for plastic. But if you look at this one, so I'm not an authority on the beautiful side of things, but these are grasslands and shola forests. And it is from my part of the country, from Karnataka, Goa, Kerala, and Maharashtra. And these shola grasslands are great infrastructures, but we don't see them as infrastructures. We see them as empty lands that are not working for their living. And we will then run electricity transmission corridors. We will run highways through it. Like with the Hubballi-Ankola railroad, we will run railways through it. Like with the railroad, highway, and transmission lines that are planned from Goa to Karnataka, we will run all these things through this because we don't see this, we see this as empty, useless land. It is not a technical issue. It is not a legal issue. It is a cultural issue, what we value and what we don't value. So if you want to fight this fight, you have to fight this fight culturally. You have to change the culture of people. And what is culture? Culture is the song that is being sung to you at home, outside in the streets, in the court, in your workplace, in your school, in your college, everywhere you hear the same song. And that song is, but we need development. But development is a far bigger disease than COVID, because development, as it is currently defined, is not the development that Lado Sikaka is talking about. The closer we get to his vision, the better is it. Does it mean that we have to go back to a different kind of living? Probably not. We don't have a choice but to go forward. But in our going forward, what are the elements we choose? What is it that we value? And what is it that we consider worthless will define whether we have a chance or not. So I come from a place called Besan Nagar. I live in a place called Besan Nagar, is right next to the Besan Nagar beach. And I think that I have a front row seat on the theater of the absurd. Because until before COVID, I mean, they closed the theaters about 4 months ago. But before that, not a single month would pass without having a whole bunch of people who really want to do something good, who will come there for beach cleanups. They will take garbage, put it inside sacks, they will wear gloves, and lots of people. And these are good intentioned people. But what are they doing? They are moving garbage from one place to another. That's all that they're doing. So do you call it cleanup or do you call it dirtying? And then in 2014, October, the government of India stepped into it. They recruited not just Mahatma Gandhi, but also Harry Potter and his magic broom that will make the garbage disappear. But there is no magic broom. Harry Potter is not real, and garbage doesn't disappear. Garbage moves from a place to another, and it follows a discriminatory, casteist, racist logic. So if you've been part of a cleanup, then I think it is important for you to question where the garbage goes. Who lives in the places where the garbage goes to? Which places were cleaned up? Can I clean up some dirty part of Delhi and move the garbage to Racecourse Road or to near where the author of the Swachh Bharat, Mr. Narendra Modi, lives. I don't think that is possible. And it is not about Narendra Modi. It could have been Manmohan Singh. It could have been Mantek Singh Ahluwalia. It could have been Jayalalitha. It could be Uddhav Thackeray. It could be any rich person, Mukesh Ambani, you name it. And it could be my house. You can't bring garbage from Kodingayur in my town. It's a dump yard, which is located in the middle of an area that is a reserved constituency where only every alternate election you have a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe a candidate coming up. So it's a predominantly working class neighborhood. That is where my garbage goes to. That is where my city's solution relies on. Okay, so your solutions are oppressive solutions. Our solutions, my solutions, are oppressive solutions, and these are called false solutions. I call them false solutions because they are discriminatory. So environment can never be monochromatic. It cannot be green. It has to have the other shades. It has to have the blue of the water, the red of the working class, the rainbow of the communities with multiple sexuality identities. It contains everything. Just as I think the whole fetish with tree plantation, which is ridiculous. Why do you only plant trees? Why not grasses? Why not scrub? Why not thorny bushes? Why not what we call weeds? Because this is what the landscape is. Chennai's landscape is thorny scrub. There's some stretches of tropical deciduous forest. So you have different kinds of things, and one needs to look at this in a very multi. So diversity is what matters. Diversity in ecology and diversity in human experiences. So false solutions like this are only possible in unequal and racist societies. The other thing is that you cannot really question these solutions because these solutions come out at a time of crisis. They're defined by problems perceived by powerful people, and they're defined as solutions by the powerful people. So if I were to say your proposal of solar power is actually a problem, there'll be a huge hue and cry because around the world, all the white people are cheerleaders for solar power. And I think that solar power has to be questioned. It might have a role to play. Any technology might have a role to play. Even coal might have a role to play. Who it does, what it means for the future, what it means for other animals, all these things have to be taken into consideration. Any kind of unquestioning obedience, even to what we call solutions, is an injustice that you're doing against yourself, against the future, and against all other life forms. So why do false solutions appear viable? One, because the costs of these solutions are borne by other people. I am not the other people. I am the people. I am the 1%. You are the 1%. If you're on this call, you are the 1%. You're privileged, you are elite, and you are part of the problem, but wanting to be part of the solution. And the solutions or the problems don't affect us the same way that they affect other people. So the first thing we need to realize as people with privilege is that we have privilege. The second thing we need to do is to ensure that we put our privilege to work for others. I think that most of you who are here have already done the second thing, that you are working for things that are beyond yourself. And so again, for that, salams. The second, who are the people who are hurt by this externality? Externality means I do something, I gain something out of it, but somebody else gets the cost. I run a factory, I manufacture a product very cheap. I sell it, I make a profit, but I don't have sufficient environmental controls. I don't pay my workers well enough. Then my workers and the environment and the community around me are paying the actual cost of the product. If that cost were factored into the cost of the product, your product would not be as competitive as something else. Plastic carry bags, for example, are an extra example. Mr. Ambani, with his polypropylene factory, his polystyrene factory, and his polyethylene factory in Hazira and in Jamnagar, is actually all his money is my money. It is your money, because we are all paying the price of his prosperity. The second is the invisibility, which means the people that it affects are usually people from marginalized communities. So it is invisible. They are invisible. If I have a desalination plant or a solar power plant and a large solar park, the people who are affected by that solar power park are not very visible. The solar power might come from Rewa in Madhya Pradesh into Delhi metro, and all the people who are riding metro might have a small little happiness in their heart that their karma is right. It is like having, fair trade coffee in what is that big company? I forget the company, but one big coffee company. You can have fair trade coffee. You have guilt-free consumption. You feel good about it. You go on a flight. And then you pay an extra $20 for planting of so many trees. It does something good and warm in your heart, and that is an invisibility. Starbucks is what I was looking for, but it could be any other thing also. So false solutions. Riding metro might have a small little heart that their karma is right. Hello, can you hear me? Can somebody tell me if I'm echoing?
No, it's fine, Niti.
All right, okay, fine. So false solutions are actually more problematic than problems. In fact, in India, if you look at it, there are more people who are impacted and affected by solutions than there are people who are affected by problems. Because these solutions come in during quick fixes, lockdown, solution, right? So you have many of these kinds of solutions that come in and you cannot question it, because when we call for a climate emergency, we are saying suspension of democratic debate. Do not hear the voices of people who don't matter. So asking for a climate emergency, while I understand the need for it, has to be very carefully done. We are asking for urgent solutions. We're asking for urgent interventions, not for a suspension of democracy. If you look at the EIA 2020, the EIA 2020 says that solar parks, which means that I can have each 1 megawatt of solar requires 5 acres of land. A 600 megawatt solar power plant will require 3,000 acres of land. But because solar is a solution and we are in the midst of a climate emergency, and Mr. Narendra Modi wants to show that we would like to have 220 gigawatts so that the global white audience gets very happy, we are saying solar in EIA 2020 will not have to go through any kind of environmental due diligence. It will just be passed. It postpones real solutions because real solutions are very difficult. They are complicated questions. All the questions that we deal with are political questions. They involve who are you, who am I, who is affected, who is not, and we should be speaking for the people whose voices cannot be heard. We should not be speaking for them. We should be creating spaces for them to speak for themselves. We should be creating spaces for the wolf's voice to be heard. And those things take time. They're complicated. And we are looking for quick fixes. And we are looking for low effort. And that is a problem. So take the example of Chennai water crisis. I mean, in Chennai, when we had the water crisis, we tried to bring in water from, where is that place? Jolarpete, by trains. And normally we have rain dance. But when the train came, we had a train dance. When you look at this whole thing, is that you need to have a serious paradigm shift. When we talk about energy, if you look at the global climate crisis narrative, it has been driven by the West, and we have lapped it hook and sinker. So if you look at that, what is being told is there's a global climate crisis. The climate crisis is caused because of global warming. The global warming is caused because of one gas called carbon dioxide. That gas is primarily emitted because of burning of fossil fuel. Burning of fossil fuel is done primarily because of electricity. And therefore, if you change the source of electricity, everything else will be fine. But that is not the case. Because if you change the source of electricity and you continue to do that crappy things that you were already doing, then there is no point of changing the source of electricity. You might as well do it with coal and finish the whole damn thing quickly. If you want a solution, then the solution has to make sense for Lado Sikaka. If not, it is not a solution. It is an oppressive, racist, casteist, discriminatory intervention. So if you look at this, you have first of all, the fact that energy is not just electricity is something that eludes us. I just did a story on Adani, my favorite company, and they have a 648 megawatt solar park, one of the first to set up a mega solar park in India. And Adani, as you know, is got to be one of the most controversial companies, especially when it comes to climate crisis. But this company, when it sets up a 648 megawatt solar power, there are actually people who criticize them for setting up a coal-fired power plant who are cheering them. The fact that you have a problematic entity, an ungovernable and uncontrollable, unregulatable entity in charge of your most fundamental energy need is something that is escaping them. So for the 648 megawatts, it's close to 3,000 acres of required just for solar panels. There are about 2.5 million solar modules, 380,000 foundations, and 6,000 kilometers of cable, including copper, aluminum, and other stuff that Sikaka would not approve of. This is in Ramanathapuram, which is a southern district. It's an arid district in Tamil Nadu. In Tamil Nadu, as per the ancient medieval texts, there are 5 landscapes. There is the Palai, the Marudam, the Mullai, the Neidal, and the Kurinji. The Palai is a desert, but in Tamil Nadu, we don't have a real desert. We have arid lands, and this is an arid land, but the lands are very fertile. This is black clay soil called Karisal Mand. And what you see over here in this arid lands is rainfall does happen. It's about 800 millimeters, 700 millimeters a year. And when the rainfall happens, then you have this large curve that you see ringed by trees of green. That curve is called a kanmai. It's an irrigation tank, a huge irrigation tank with a very small area along the edges where water will be stored. Everything else is called a water catchment, Neer Pidi Pagadi. And that area is not meant to be developed. This is another. So all these are in Ramnath in a place called Kamudi. This is another. So when you look at this is not just empty land. There is energy that is being harvested on a daily basis. A lot of what you see is Prosophis juliflora, which is an exotic plant that was brought into India, but it has made India its home. And just like many of us who thrive over here, if you can survive in this harsh land of Chennai or Ramanathapuram, then you make it your home. So you can't, just as you can't have exotic foreigner influx, this guy came from there, that guy came from there, are you an original Tamil, are you an original Maratha, like that, you can't even have that. It is even less likely that you can have that kind of a discussion with plants and animals, because they've always been moving. With your help, without your help, they've always moved. And Prosophis has made Tamil Nadu its home. And Prosophis has an entire economy of charcoal, which can be a substitute to steel making, fossil fuel-based steel making, if you chose to. And from here, you have close to 15,000, I forget the exact number, but a very massive amount of charcoal goes from Ramanathapuram's Kamudi district to Odisha for the steel mills. I don't particularly care about the steel mills, but I'm just saying that there is a connection of energy. Second, you also have a very important goat-based economy, a livestock economy, that ordinary people, a widow with nothing and a thatched roof, will have 5 goats. And the goats graze in the commons. And the commons give her the energy. The original solar plants are plants, the botanical plants. They convert with roughly the same efficiency solar power into starch, which is taken by humans or by livestock and then transferred on. So there is a very real energy economy that is already there. When you do this and set up a solar park, you disrupt energy. You don't create energy. You're disrupting energy. And what does this energy go to? For the crappy uses that we have in Chennai. To air condition your malls, to do wasteful groundwater pumping, etc. Yeah. So real problems actually have very difficult answers. Chennai flooded in 2015, as I already said. I mean, we mark our years by one disaster or the others. So we have 2015 is floods, 2005 was floods, 2004 is tsunami, 2016 was Varda, 2019 was water scarcity, and we don't know what 2020 will bring besides Corona, which is everybody. But Chennai has special status. We are disaster capital of the world. But other states also, if you look at Bombay, you look at Bangalore, all of us suffer from floods. And it's very wrong to use the word floods, because floods are a phenomenon where water goes to places where water should not go to. What you see on the left-hand side is the Velachery Eri. Eri means irrigation tank. These irrigation tanks were constructed 700, 8 years ago when wiser people lived. Those were classified as Porambok. Porambok is a dirty word in Tamil now, which means a worthless person or a worthless place. But Porambok in those days meant areas that you should never touch, that you cannot build upon, that you cannot buy or sell. And this Eri Porambok has been converted into a building layout. Areas are water bodies, irrigation tanks, where when Chennai's northeast monsoon hits, it fills up this thing. Northeast monsoon, which is what, if you want to come to Chennai, then you can't complain about Chennai's nature. It is located right next to the Bay of Bengal. So the Bay of Bengal is an angry sea, unlike the Arabian Sea. Arabian Sea is also getting more angry, which means that we have cyclonic weather all the time. So you can't come here and complain about cyclones. The trees over here don't complain about cyclones. If you're a tree that cannot handle the cyclone, you will fall. The northeast monsoon is not like the southwest monsoon. Now even the southwest monsoon is misbehaving. But otherwise, southwest monsoon is a predictable monsoon. It comes on a certain date, leaves on a certain date. If you take your umbrella, it won't disappoint you. It will allow you to use it. In Madras, if you take your umbrella, it will not rain. It will rain one day and it will pour like crazy. It will not come the next year. The next year it will come and behave like it is a southwest monsoon. And just as you think that everything is fine, it will misbehave and give you the 2015 floods. So in such a place, the areas have been constructed to ensure that there is water for the dry day, not for the rainy day. And when you build houses inside a water body, you can't claim to be flooded, because water bodies don't get flooded, they get filled up. And if you build a house inside a water body, your house will get filled up. This is another tank called the Kodungayur tank. And the Kodungayur tank, I show this because you see straight lines. A lot of things happen when after the Chennai floods and after Bombay floods, I said this is because of unplanned development. It is not because of unplanned development. It is because of planned development. If you look at the Kodungayur tank, you will see straight lines, rectangles and squares. If you see rectangles and squares, it means that you have people who have studied in engineering colleges, like myself, who have done this planning, because engineers cannot think in irregular shapes. For us, geometry is all that matters. And we have our own concept of efficiency. If a river is slowly, uselessly winding its way from one place to another, we will straighten the river, because the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and the river is seen as an inefficient entity that requires to quickly do its job of draining the water into the Bay of Bengal. So here we have a situation where the lake of Kodungayur was actually, there was a project called the Eri scheme or the lake scheme. And that scheme had large number of extremely educated people working to plan it out. And then they made a project proposal. They got the approval of white people in Washington, D.C., and World Bank gave us a loan to fill our lake. And then they had a flooding crisis. This is the Pallikarnai marshland, and every city in Chennai every city in India will have similar stories. The Pallikarnai marshland is 50 square kilometers of water spread at one time. And on the western side, you had 250 square kilometers of land on which, wherever the water fell, whatever did not soak through the earth and fill up the water bodies and the wells and the other shallows would come running into this large water body. And then you see this small kind of a U-shaped canal. It will drain out through the canal into the Buckingham Canal and into the sea. And this 50 square kilometer water body never goes dry. What we did is, on the right-hand side, we carved out, it is called the Kadiveli Porambok, or the floodplains. And the floodplains Porambok, we decided to hand it over. We said that the floodplains Porambok are useless land. There is absolutely no value for it. Chennai needs to develop. And so let us hand it over to the IT sector, the knowledge sector. And so 385 acres of that wetlands were handed over to the IT SEZ. And you have extremely intelligent people, the knowledge, the cream de la cream of India, the software engineers and the other people who do cutting edge research for Oracle, making their algorithms run 1 nanosecond faster. All those people, brainy people, are located inside a wetland. And so when the water came, The water did not respect their brains, and it flooded that entire area, but it also flooded other people. So this, what we call growth, looks like this. In 1980, we were a sleepy, overgrown village, a 1,200 square kilometer area of the Chennai metropolitan region, of which only 47 square kilometers was under buildings, under construction. So this is the paved earth, because our economy, the modern economy, values only paved surfaces. So we call it a paved earth economy. Whereas Lado Sikaka is arguing for an open earth economy, which he says that the land has to be left open for it to yield value, a civilizational conflict. So in this quest, in as per the metrics of the paved economy, we were a primitive town in 1980. That is the time when I was going to school, and you had to be really unlucky to get hit by a car, because you can. We used to take our bicycle and we will cross the entire road from one side to the another, singing songs, because getting hit by a car is a very unlikely thing. And those cars also, these bulky, clunky ambassadors that would make a loud noise well before they arrived anywhere close to you. From 1980 to 2010, your area under paved hard surfaces has gone from 47 square kilometers to 402 square kilometers, and your area under just wetland, not open land, but just wetland, has gone down from 186 to 71.5. So your solutions, how do you tell whether a solution is a false solution? If you have a very complex problem like the climate crisis, and somebody comes and tells you all this will change if you just switch to renewable energy, hit them in the nose non-violently, because that is wrong. That's a complex problem, and we need a complex solution. Second, the issue of externality. They keep telling you that development is good and somebody has to pay the cost. You can't have an omelette without breaking an egg. The question is, whose egg are you breaking, and who gets to eat the omelette? Third, your false solutions will ensure that people like you and me don't suffer any inconvenience. So the minute you see that the solution does not hurt you, you know it is wrong solution. The solution has to inconvenience you, and there has to be a challenging of the status quo. Otherwise, this crisis is not worth solving. And lastly, false solutions usually replace local for global, democratic for autocratic, like emergencies, and wise interventions for clever interventions or smart interventions, like the smart city. And there you will find that technology is brought in as a solution, not social change, not mind change, not value change, not getting closer to Lado Sikaka, but technology. We will do better mining. We will have better electricity. We will have more efficient lights. So beware of that. So identifying false solutions is something that we need to be okay. And so I come to the last slide. Usually I'm asked, what is a solution? I would say, don't ask me that question. Let's spend some time as young people asking, what is the problem? If you ask me what is the way forward, I can give you broad frameworks. The broad frameworks means you need to change your value system. Where the value system valorizes built spaces, I would valorize the Porambok. I suppose most of you would know this uh, actor called Rajnikant. After the police fire in Thuthukudi, where close to 14 people were killed for protesting against a copper smelter, Mr. Rajnikant said, Tamil Nadu will become a graveyard because of all these protests. I'm saying that Tamil Nadu will become alive only if people protest. Because what are they protesting for? In every single one of these cases, be it the 8-lane expressway or the fight against hydrocarbon extraction in Kaveri Delta, ordinary people are fighting against the elites, saying that land use must not be changed. A land that is currently being used as a forest, or a land that is currently being used as a water body or as cropland, should not be converted to a road or a port or for extraction of hydrocarbon, etc. So I think that the fight in Tamil Nadu and in other parts of the country, like with the fight against the bullet train, the really inspirational fight. If there are any people from Bombay who have been part of the forest fight, please take a bow. There are other inspirational struggles by ordinary people coming together across our country. Ordinary people keep this world going, this country going. It is not governments. The second, I think that we need to redefine expertise. Expertise is not the IITs or the Anna universities. Expertise requires integrity, it requires wisdom, and it requires courage. Our experts who are sitting inside these institutions might have some amount of understanding of what Fourier transforms is and what meteorology is, but they don't have the courage to speak the truth. And if they don't have the courage to speak the truth, they are not experts. Reject them. Another form of expertise that you find is, if science is a way of knowing, then there is no singular for science. There are sciences, there are different ways of knowing. A fisherman or a fisherwoman knows the sea very differently than a marine biologist will. And we need access to both kinds of knowledge in order to be able to craft what we see as a problem and what we see as a solution. You cannot have a future unless you challenge and shut down the Wall Street or the Dalal Street. The banks have to go. You cannot have sustainable exploitative economy. Grow a forest, stop a mine, rob a bank, build a community, unbuild a city, all the rest of it is right there. Thank you.
Uh, Thank you, Niti. I've put down a range of things which stood out for me, right from what Lado Sikaka said, the complexity of solutions and non-solutions. I want to start off with something which will be relevant for us. It's a question. And see, we are working towards a global climate strike, and we are seeing what, as youth, we can demand, um, and how we can demand that well. And my question would be a bit generic as to how does one tell a powerful story? We have the values, we might have the knowledge. Um, what goes into that? How do you speak uh, such that it moves people? In your experience.
Well, I've not really been successful. Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah. So, I mean, I think that moving people is something that I don't do myself. I get other people to move people. So, you need to be able to find the kinds of actors whose stories would move people. I don't have any stories that can be told that will move people. I have stories that other people have told me that I can tell you. So Lado Sikaka's story, for instance, I think moved me a hell of a lot. It opened my eyes to something. So I think that we need to find storytellers from our biradari, but also from other biradaris, from other communities. And as youngsters, I think we need to understand that your learning is not inside your college. At the age of 24, I returned to India and I discovered that I don't know anything. It is a very humbling feeling because when I came here, I was pretty cocky. And you go out and you realize that there's something called caste that hits you in your face. Despite the fact that you've spent about 12 years in Kendriya Vidyalaya singing out the Indian pledge that says that all Indians are equal, and you realize that they are not. And then your education begins. The education begins on the streets, on the farms, on the beaches, in the waters. And so I'm saying that the stories that you need to find are out there, not necessarily among the people who are learned, but from other places. The second, I think that your just in terms of communication, if you look at, I'll give you some brass tacks basic examples. Mm, the first thing you need to know is when you're doing something, who is your audience? Who is your intended audience? So if you're saying that an intended audience cannot be general public, don't say general public. You might design something that goes out to general public, but it has to be designed for an audience in your mind. Right now, when I'm speaking to Fridays of Future. So in my mind, I have English speaking 18 to 30 is I have thought about that. That's what I thought about. I said 18 to 30 is the age group. These are people who are interested in doing something more than just looking at themselves. If I was speaking to a general classroom, I would change the way I spoke. I would change the detail that I'm giving. So, in terms of stories that I've told, I think pick up simple stories that have deep meanings and probably one or two layers that you can. So that is if you're trying to spread it very wide. If you have very targeted, which means smaller numbers, then you do something very different. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think that audience and the medium, both of them are very important. Medium means, are you taking it through a direct dialogue, which might be as a face-to-face puppet show, or a face-to-face talk, or or a street corner meeting? Are you doing it online? What is your medium, etc.? All these things matter, and who is your audience?
Yep. For instance, I've read about the Kamudi issue, and it did not hit me as hard as how when you showed the area and the solar field.
Yeah.
One had read that the Gundar River died, because of the water extraction and so on. So Meher has a question, and she asks, "What is a way to break the hegemony of the insane trade that has built these extractive long supply chains and governs each household now by creating irreversible dependencies in a sense?" In other
Uh,
words, yeah,
yeah.
how do we radically localize and rebuild our relationships with ecology and resources around?
So I think that the goal is to break it, and how we will break it, I don't have an idea, but I think I know the pathway. The pathway is to encourage local economies, and not just in terms of I as an individual will go and shop in a kirana dukan, in a kailang, in a small palasara kadai, or a kirana dukan, which is a small mom and dad small shop, as opposed to Reliance or Spencer's or Nilgiris or whatever you have. I think that is something that is very important. Where are you buying your vegetables from? How far does your vegetables travel? Are you doing anything to have to promote urban local? Because these might be seen as very simple things. Don't grow vegetables in your house for your local consumption. That is a personal act. When does it become a political act? It becomes a political act when you grow it as a group and challenge the economy of a whole bunch of traders who are bringing in food from very far away. So I think that localizing definitely localizing is a very radical thing. Localizing in terms of water, localizing in terms of vegetables and other necessities, I think it is not just radical, but it is also something that makes a lot of sense. When Corona struck, all the big malls were shut. What we depended on was our local street vendors. And so I think that there is a definite lesson for us. And also what it means is that you're putting all the value, or the money stays at home. It does not escape to Bombay or to New York or other places. So I think that is something that will also help you challenge the economic model. So it could involve urban gardening, but not done as a fad, but done with a very clear politics to challenge, which means the produce that you get from there needs to be, let's say that you are doing this. Who benefits from that urban gardening? If it is again a bunch of uncles and aunties from well-off communities who are benefiting from that, then that is not radical. That organic means nothing. It is a problem. The food has to go. The food can go to your local anganwadis. So how do you make the government purchase your produce? That's a political fight. How do you make them purchase organic produce? How do you make them purchase small farmers produce? Because your farming is an inherently feudal act. You have to challenge social relations, as well as your human relation with environment.
Gardening as a political act, quite a radical. This thing reminds one of Ron Finlay, who calls himself a guerrilla gardener, and then he caused street side commons where he makes the the parks and the street sides and the dividers into places where community can grow and benefit. So Matrika has a question. Considering the emergency of climate change, it is frustrating sometimes how the voices of youth are just tokenized, but our demands are not taken seriously. How do we bridge that gap? And the experts are not speaking out, like you said.
I don't know who you define as experts. You have to redefine expertise. You are probably an expert on the future. We have people in the government right now with one foot in the grave who are making draft notifications that have an implication on the future. They're not experts. They're not going to be there to see this. I'm saying that you can definitely speak about your aspirations. Nobody is an expert better than you who can speak about what you want 30 years from now to be like, what you want 1,000 years from now to be like. Second, you can't wait for people to accept your demands. You got to grab the space. You have to grab it creatively. You have to grab it non-violently. You have to win people over. How do you do that? Go figure. I think you're already in the process of figuring out. There are no blueprints for that because things change all the time. But one of the things that you can rest assured that you're already in the path of doing is you are doing it collectively. You are not Matrika. You are Matrika who is part of Fridays for Future. It's a group of young people who want to do something together. Those group of young people are consulting a whole bunch of other people. These other people are experts in their own domains. I don't mean myself. I'm talking about you should go out and speak to communities, to farmers, to fishermen, to road sweepers, to domestic vendors, to domestic help, because these are all people who have lived experiences of what environmental problems are. And only then will you be able to get a sense of what you have to solve. In the climate emergency, just to very, very quickly tell you, is that you will get a lot of opportunities and you have to plan for it. The nice thing about this whole climate crisis is the crisis part of it. I know that if it rains, it'll flood. So I have my stories all ready. I have my camera ready. The minute there is some rainwater out there, I will go around saying, I told you so, I told you so, look at this is happening. So you have the same thing. So you can have a heat wave story, a garbage burning story, industrial disaster story, a gas leak story, flooding story, a cyclone story. You have about 20 different stories. Prepare it and keep for every city. Take it out and roll it out, because an opportunity, a disaster is an opportunity. You grab eyeballs. And I have seen cussed people getting scared, and bureaucrats in the government getting slightly more sensitive. So use those opportunities. And as young people, never allow people to think that you are cute. That, oh, young people are speaking for the future. That is not what we're asking for. We have come here to tell you something very serious. So shut up and listen. You have to be able to assert yourself, and that assertion can be done primarily by preparing yourself with knowledge. And the nice thing is you can easily be smarter than them because it doesn't take much effort.
Related to that question, Niti, and related to something you said about climate being declared as an emergency, and then is that a democratic thing at all? And one thing we've been doing in FFF is to unpack and kind of unravel what the national climate action plans and the state climate action plans mean. And how do you look at these documents, and also in the light of what Matrika has asked, and in the light of what you've said about democracy and climate?
So one, I think that there is nobody that I have come across in the government that actually believes that climate change is real. And that is a very scary thought. That is the emergency. So they're all looking at it as if, it's some cute thing that, we talk about. It's like a tree planting thing. I will change it. So we had Mr. Piyush Goyal talking the other day about circular economy. What the hell is that? Circular economy is everything is circle. The only circle I know is a zero. And in this circular economy, we will continue to do what we're doing, but we'll somehow make it circular. How can you make a linear system circular just like that? And how will you do it in a manner that is also catering to the goals of social justice that our constitution swears by? Mr. Goyal says that if all the paper in the country were collected and they were recycled, there would be so many million jobs. But the issue is, what is the rest of the economy doing? You have just opened the Hasdeo Arand forest for mining. And if you open that up, you won't have people who need jobs because you need water. A forest has to be taken out, uprooted in order to get to the coal. You have made your choice between the coal and water forever. So I'm saying that there is this mismatch. So I really wonder whether these people are reading things. Are they intelligent, or are they just too old to really care about the future? So the issue about, how does one bring this in? I think that invest in cultivating. So your fight is long term. Okay, so I think that most of the problematic people will be gone in the next 5 to 10 years. So what you really need to do is, and it is going to be shitty for the next 10 years. What you need to do is to build up a very strong, and do it very slowly. Don't do it with the sense that there is an emergency, so everything has to be done now. You have to build very deep foundations. Very deep foundations means, how do you understand? How do you question? How do you address extremely complicated questions about solving a problem without creating another problem for somebody else? The engineering way of doing it is essentially to transfer the problem. If you say clean the garbage, they will take it from one place and dump it in another. They will take it from one place, bury it somewhere. They will take it from one place and burn it so that it gets spread out democratically to everybody. That is not what we're looking for. How do you solve a problem without creating a problem for somebody else? It's a very difficult question. And I would say that you need to be able to engage with that question. And that is where I'm saying that is your foundation building. The second thing is to develop, connections with people not like yourself, but also young people. And how do you understand different ways of articulating the problem? I think through that collectivizing, then how do you influence politics? You're having elections coming up in different places. I think Bihar has an election coming up. Tamil Nadu has an election coming up. These are places that we totally have to intervene, because the mindset is changing. In Tamil Nadu, if you look at it, I'm sorry, I keep referring to this place because it's this geography that I know the best. Over the last 20 years, I've seen a radical change where political parties that have been extremely pro corporate, pro industry, and pro this disease called development are engaging in environmental speak. In social justice has always been part, but in environmental speak. So the 8-lane expressway from Salem to Chennai, you had all major political parties speaking out against it. We had the ADMK making very wishy-washy statements, but they were very clearly perturbed by it. We had the chief minister declaring the Kaveri Delta as a special agricultural region. There's a bit of a trick played in that, but despite the fact there is a certain acknowledgement of popular sentiment. So I'm saying you make that popular sentiment. You can rest assured that it will work. So don't be cynical. Things change. And usually things change because young people voice out. In my state, I've seen the last 20 years, there was this really amazing rock star called Nammalvar, who is a organic farmer advocate, who mobilized, who had kids just eating out of his fingers. He kind of spread this word around, which is based on land, identity, and talking about a different way of living where you can have a lot of fun. So a lot of people think that this whole Lado Sikaka way of living is not fun. You have to make it fun. You have to actually present what beauty there is in that, what joy there is in that. And then I think more of us will join that. We cannot all be people who are, ascetic, rejecting this, rejecting that. That is not what we're asking for. We're saying, how can we be ourselves without harming the environment? And there are ways to do it.
Anybody else has questions, please type it in the chat box. Anybody on YouTube, you can type it in the live chat. I want to ask a question again on behalf of people in FFF. In the discussions we've been having, something we are doing is we got Vishwaja, for instance, to do a session on us how to file an RTI, and we are going ahead with that, how to. And my question would be very broadly, what essential tools does youth equip themselves with in today's time? Metaphorically, physically, sociologically, whatever.
So one thing is that it's very difficult to speak in the abstract. It doesn't really matter if you read about 20 laws. What matters is how many laws have you used. So if you are in different places, then get engaged in campaigns. The campaigns would have a very specific objective. It might be very geographically localized. EIA 2020, for instance, has given us an opportunity to understand the EIA notification. And so thank you, Mr. Javadekar, for that. But also what we need to do is, if you take up, say, a small construction project that's coming up in your neighborhood, and five FFF volunteers from Pune or from Kolhapur are sitting together to fight against it, then you will need to know what are the laws. So normally what an activist does, a solidarity activist, is that you have to understand the what we call Jadagam or the Janma Kundalini. You have to make the uh, that birth chart. So what is a birth certificate? Who is the my bap? Who is the mother father for this project? So mother father would be, let's say, it is there is right now a commercial real estate project where they want to redevelop a portion of the fishing community near Marina Beach into a five-star commercial real estate. That land belongs to the housing board. So first thing I will do is, whose land is it? Then they say housing board. Then my question is, can housing board do it? How will I know whether housing board can do it? I will go to the housing board act. I will say Tamil Nadu Housing Board Act. There's nothing called Tamil Nadu Housing Board Act. Are there any government orders? I will go to the government order. I will look at that. Then I will see that they can do it, they cannot do it. But then if they want to do it, they'll have to do X, Y, and Z. Then I will go there, I'll file an RTA saying, have you done X, Y, and Z? Then I find loopholes in it. It is like your Vedantangal, where a bird sanctuary was to be converted into was to be denotified. Then we go and we have to find out the information. So RTI is a very powerful source. Using that RTI, you will get to learn. So the minute you have something, you say that, oh, this thing is happening in my backyard. This company is burning stuff at night. Then I need to find out about that company. I need to find out about that company's relationship to the people who are supposed to regulate that company. I have to find out what laws regulate them, and I have to find out how they have performed as per those laws. So for all this, I can use internet, I can use physical verification, I can use local testimonies, because local testimonies generally don't lie. The data that you get from the pollution control board may lie. It might say that there is no pollution, but the local people are saying, I smell it every night. Then you have to do evidence gathering. So I will go there at night and I have to make it somehow real. I can either take a camera and show the thing burning and say, look, they said it's not burning, but here it is burning. So evidence does not always have to be something that has to be taken to a laboratory. You can do visual evidence. You can do community environmental monitoring. Community environmental monitoring means, how do you make the lived experiences of community into data and evidence that the authorities cannot ignore? I'll give you one example and then stop this answer. So we worked in a place called Kadalur, which is near Pondicherry, that you might know, the old French colony. And Kadalur has an industrial region called Sipcot. We call it Sikpot, but Sipcot is a heavily industrialized chemical industrial region, and it's an extremely smelly place. And the people have been complaining about smells. The first time we went and told the pollution control board chairperson that this place is heavily polluted because of the air and there's all kinds of smell, she said, even when you make idlis, even then steam comes and people will complain about that also. So what we did is we did something called an odor monitoring exercise. This odor monitoring exercise was a tool that was designed based on what the local people said. When we went there and we asked them, they said, it smells like an unwashed lavatory. It smells like rotten cabbage. It smells like dead body. It smells like shit. It smells like something else. It's got a hospital smell. It's got the smell of nail polish. These are all the different kinds of smells that they come across. And then we asked them, where do you get the smell? They say, we get it over there, we get it over there. So what we did is we got people from the community to be monitors. These monitors are human monitors. The monitoring device they use is your nose, not an expensive sensor, because your nose is a wonderful sensor. It tells you that you are in trouble and you move away. and they use the snows. So we had four stations. The stations were taken where we took people, and they said these are the places where maximum amount of smell can be felt. It is outside Jairaj State, the theater in Kudigade. It is near this factory, and it is in that place, and it is in that place. So then we had a five monitors, and the five monitors had to be standardized. So we took them to different places. We blindfolded them. We asked them to smell and raise their fingers to rate the smell. One being no smell, five being quite bad, and 10 is really horrible. And so all people would close their eyes, they smell it, and they say something, and you have a standardization exercise. Then you set these five people loose for a period of 30 days, where three times a day and 8-hour intervals, they go and stand in these four places and record the smell, record the wind direction, and you end up with a scientific report that documents 32 odors. And you find that at night time, the odor is the most intense. That in these places, these kinds of odors are more intense. And then we did a right to information with the industries, where we took out information about their raw materials, and we find that they're using acetone. Acetone is what is there inside a nail polish. It's a solvent. Acetone has a smell of the nail polish. We did a match between the volatile compounds and their odors using an odor library, and we find a perfect match between what the local people have said and the fact that the industries are the polluters. Supreme Court Monitoring Committee says we have spent nothing on this. Monitoring committee comes to Kadalur. We hand over this report, and they say set standards for volatile organic compounds, because all these industries are emitting volatile organic compounds into the atmosphere, and India does not have VOC standards, and so set standards. So for a national level, there was something that came out of a simple exercise done by the lived experiences of ordinary people. You get the IIT professor, that man will ask you for 7 lakhs and give you a wrong report, unless he has tremendous courage. And there are people like that also.
We have a few questions on YouTube, and Jasmine asks, how do you think the youth can change the current value system?
I think that one is by yourself going out and learning from different teachers. Second, in the conversation, so value systems, as I said, are slow to change. So, what stories you tell, what subtext they have, these things all contribute to our value system. What films you make, if you're people who are making feature films are huge creators of cultural values. So in Tamil feature films, you have the only way to quote a woman is by teasing that person. That has become a standard over here. So you need to change the way stories are told, change the way narratives are done, and so it's primarily in your interactions and the stories that you tell. What you initially asked me about is that how do you tell powerful stories with powerful actors, powerful narrators, but the content itself has to be something that is not simplistic. It might just have one small thing that you're trying to shift, but say that story. So that is how value change happens. Don't be disappointed that your one story did not succeed. I think that there are a lot of people like you, a lot of people like me who are also engaged in this, and our efforts are not insignificant.
Oh, one more question. Kenyum asks, what are your views on the campaign on population control? Do you think it's one of the solutions?
Uh, No, I don't think. I think it is a very problematic thing. The issue of population control has been consistently brought up by people. There's something called the Malthusian theory, and which says that as the population increases, consumption increases, and then you basically uh, strip the earth bare. What we are finding instead is that population definitely has an effect, but something that is far more significant is overconsumption. So where you have a very small minority of the population, so it is not as if humanity has caused this climate crisis. Most of the people who are bearing the worst effects of the climate crisis do not even have a carbon footprint, have never traveled in a plane, have never really been outside there, do not use the kinds of things that we use, are not on internet. Internet is a hugely, the IT industry and internet is an extremely carbon intensive industry. Aviation industry's footprint is very large also because of the IT industry. And the footprint is not just a carbon footprint. We're not just facing a carbon crisis. We're facing an ecosystem crisis, an ecological collapse. And that ecological collapse is because of biodiversity loss. It is because of land use change. There was you guys should read this report called by the intergovernmental panel, intergovernmental science panel on biodiversity and ecological services, IPBES. They released a report in May 2019, and that report is far more important than IPCC. IPCC is carbon, IPCC is climate, important, but it is largely by technicians. Intergovernmental IPBES report, on the other hand, is something that has been authored by an interdisciplinary team and has also taken information and knowledge from indigenous communities from around the world and from people who live close to the earth. And so it is a far more powerful thing which says that your land use change is something that is very, very troubling. So one way that I would say is that if you find negative land use change, proposals involving negative land use change, fight it. Where possible, try to fight for positive land use change. Positive land use change means if you have an area under a dirty industry, and that dirty industry, for instance, a coal-fired power plant is shut down, can you release that area for something that is really radically different? And that radically different cannot be an enclosed park. It will have to be something that has benefit for the local people and at the bottom of the pyramid. Fight enclosures. Anything that says that I have created a beautiful nature reserve and there'll be armed guards protecting it, that's a problem. We need to find other ways of regulating our commons.
Patrika's question is related to the global climate strike. And just a little background on that is that global climate strike is where youth largely fights for climate action. And we've had different experts telling us about what should be done and what we should demand and so on. And there are local chapters who are thinking about what they should do in their own context. For instance, last climate strike we spoke about, it was a climate strike, but we spoke about the Adani issue and the port. So Matrika asked if we were to make one demand from the administration right now at a national level uh, regarding the climate crisis, what do you think it should be?
Hmm. First, I think that the climate strike does not have to be about climate as such, so without using that word. So I would say that, should it be abstract? This is something, it's a difficult question. You've thrown a very difficult question at me. I'm not prepared for that. I don't have one single answer for that. So what I would say, if I were to be, I can bullshit to you, but I don't want to do that. So what I would say is that let me give it some thought. And can I, because it's a very serious question you've asked, I don't think I can put it in one demand for all of India. What I think would be really, what would really make sense is your climate impacts are going to be very local. It is going to be at a ward level. It is going to be at a city level. So if you can try and break it down to that level in terms of your demand, that will be a very useful thing to do. There could be some overarching national demands like put environment first. This whole thing about environment or development, I'm saying there is no balance. The environment will not do any balancing. Nature is not going to do any balancing. If anything has to do balancing, your what you call development has to be within the parameters of what the limits of what nature has set. That recognition is not there in the government. I don't think that's going to come out of a demand, but you can refer to numerous Supreme Court decisions by now, including the recent the High Court decision from Sterlite, which says that if there is a toss-up between environment and economy, which way do we vote? For the environment. That's very clear. I think that we need to really reinforce among people. But beyond that, let me think about it and get back.
So we are in the process of thinking around this, asking different people and working towards the 25th, working on drafting press releases and saying as youth, this is what we want in the direction of reclaiming future. So responses to that would be, we would find it useful. So, and
Yeah, no. So I'm saying that I will
yes, yes,
respond to that
sure,
in
sure.
the
Yeah, yeah,
coming days.
that's, yeah, got it. So Meher is asking, you have mentioned the climate fight is a long-term fight. Can you please shed some light on how we as a group of youth coming from such various diverse fields can stick together, setting an example as a community, working together and making our voices strong?
I think that is something that you will have to figure out on your own, Meher, because the dynamics are very, very different. What I would say is that the it I'm anarchist. I don't really subscribe to institutions very much. I think that institutions can come and go. What is important is relationships and common purpose. Right now, you have common purpose. Work with that. It does not, because one thing that I would say is make sure you do not let Fridays for Future become an institution with its own logic, where the logic overrides everything. The logic for Fridays for Future as an organization to stay alive overrides everything else. That will be the death of everything that you dreamt of. What you need to make sure is that the idea behind which you guys began this fight, that each of you started working with this, that idea remains alive. It could be as one large group. It will probably go on for a while. Then you could split off into small groups. Small groups are better because small groups are more democratic. Small groups have better inter collegial relationships. Ensure that you don't have, so if you want to go for the long term, these are marathon runs. The first thing you need to do is not take yourself too seriously. Be humble. The forces against you are very big. Doesn't mean you can't challenge them. It just means that you can't press a change.org button and expect change to happen. Understand your position, collectivize, make sure you have good counsel around you, because there'll be times when you're feeling depressed and you need to be able to come out of it. Because if you do something and that does not work out, you don't have the luxury of being cynical. So make sure you have cynicism alarm bells all around you in terms of friends, and pull yourself out of it. You need to be able to have a good time as you do this. Every ulcer you give to the corporation is something that you celebrate. And so work on it in that way, where you make sure that your mental health is most important. And the second, that it is not just a matter for environment. Your workspace relationships, everything else has to have complete social parity. So you can't be an environmental organization again alone. You have to fight patriarchy. You have to fight against the gender disparity. You have to fight against casteism. You'll have to fight for the rights of people who are asking for, say, it might be the people who are asking for equality in terms of sexual orientation. It might be in terms of people who are asking for the right to work or workspace. So the working class movements, there has to be bridges built with these people, because this is your common friends. So as an environmental organization, as people who come from privileged communities, make sure you're reaching out to these other communities to build your common cause.
So I think that's all the questions are. So I want to thank you profoundly, Niti. I think we are going back with a lot to think about, and you've spoken several timely things. The way you've put the discourse of climate emergency and democracy for us, and I think that's offered something both adjacent and lateral for us to think about, and complexities of solutions, non-solutions, and so much more. And I hope we can be in touch with you as a community and seek your guidance whenever required, or correspond with you. So thank you for spending your time with us today. So for people watching, I just want to say that we are doing a range of sessions, especially as we go towards climate strike. So you can follow us on Twitter, which is FFF India, or email us at fridaysforfuture.india@gmail.com. On Instagram, we are fridaysforfuture.india. And on Facebook, we are Fridays, the number 4, future.india. So thank you.